Welcome to the platform, episode 5. I think I'm going to eventually stop saying what episode we're on because eventually it just won't matter. But here we are again in front of a fire. It's a beautiful night out. It's extremely cold. Schools are getting canceled because it's going to be so cold tomorrow. So we're here again to talk about different things. And today the theme of our conversation is going to be love. What it means. And as a matter of fact, Tom Baker's right here, and he's gonna start it off because he had some good things to say about it. So I'm just gonna pass it off to him right away. Hope everybody's doing good out there and in here. But here you go, Tom.
So
What did you want to talk about?
Well, actually, it's interesting. I did want to talk about love, but I'd actually like to open up. Aside from giving some context, I want to give some context, but I'd like to open up with asking you a question. So, to give the listeners some context, our last recording, and like Conrad said, like we don't want this necessarily right now to be a linear or chronological fashion of sequence, of listening. But the last video that we recorded had a lot to do with love and loving your children and having that experience. And so as I was thinking about it, once we wrap up a recording, I don't know how you feel kind of, but like when I go home and throughout the next day or whatever, I meditate on it. I'm thinking about other points that I wanted to bring up that I forgot about and start thinking about more things pertaining to what we were talking about, that I wish I would have said or I wish I didn't say, etc. And one of the things I thought a lot about was like this definition of what is love, like this working definition. Like we talked a lot about love. Like I love my kids. I love them differently, but I love them the same. And the more I thought about that, I was like, well, wait a minute. What are the viewers hearing me say, and what do they think I think love is? What do you think love is? So anyway, Connor, what does it mean to love somebody? What do you think when you hear the word love? What comes to mind?
It's definitely something that is a bond that it's a bond that can't be replaced. It's a bond that it can't go away. It's kind of like when you have a mother, a biological mother. Nothing you can do. There's nothing you can do to make it so that is no longer your biological mother. And so that kind of feeling, that unbreakable bond, is what I think what love is at the greatest level between two human beings. So like a mother for her son, father and son, brothers and sisters. There's that bond there that it just goes much deeper than you can actually articulate. It's a very powerful bond feeling, and I think we can develop a love for other people. Like when a man and a woman meet, or a couple fall in love and they get married, that bond can be built. And I definitely don't think that there's a lot of people who are together that don't have it as strong as it could be. I think people toss that word around and say, "Hey, I'm in love," but so yeah, I would say without being able to articulate it, is so that it impacts, so that it really so that I really can make you feel, or make anybody feel, with the power of it through words. It's really just that bond, and so that's how. And I mean, I don't have kids, so I can't explain it from that point perspective, but that's my answer to that.
So the Bible uses 3 different types of love in the original language. There's agape, there's phileo, and then there is like erotica. So erotica is like romantic love. Phileo, is brotherly love, and agape is like this all-encompassing, unconditional love. And I'm not a scholar on the three loves in that in the language, but so I don't know if that only pertains to like God, how God can love you. But I would say, agape is more of like if it's an all-encompassing love, it's the love that you would have for your children, or for your siblings, or like just it's I don't know, it's a different love than the other two, by the very nature of it being a different type of love. So what do you have to say? Do you think what do you think about that? The fact that there are different types of love. Somebody will say, "Hey, I love that cheeseburger. I love that restaurant. I love to ice skate. I love, fill in the blank." Does it water down what it means? What does it mean to love at its purest form?
Yeah, that's a really good question, man. Because, like we were talking about depression and how there's different levels or tiers, if you will. There are people who can be more depressed than others. There are some people who go through life never having felt depression so strongly as others. And so I feel the same with love. Honestly, love has to be a willing thing, right? It has to be fully you have to be willing to love somebody so much that you could, like, for example, it's like it says in the Bible, it's like greater love hath no man than this, greater love hath no man than this, that a man should lay down his life for his friends. And isn't that the ultimate love, right? So that's interesting, man, because you can look at different periods in time and say, hey, look, right now we're in a generation where people are more narcissistic than ever, and I actually think that's a problem today. And I even hear people talk about it, is that we are living in our most narcissistic time because we are extremely in love with ourselves, the social media, and then how we watch media, and that we see how others are celebrated because of their looks or personalities or their achievements, and so we want to see that in ourselves. So we are in love with ourselves more than I can't say ever before, but so I think there are people who go throughout their entire lives maybe never having loved as much somebody else as much as they could have because they weren't willing. So, and your question was the different stages of love, right? Can you love? What was it again? Can you say it one more time?
Well, I guess I was saying, how do you feel about the fact that there are different types of love, and within those different types of love, we abuse the word so much by saying we love certain things. Like, do you think it's watered down, or do you think, like, what are your thoughts on that in general?
We do definitely use it kind of nonchalantly, but I you're saying, like, how do I feel about it? I just think it is what it is. There's not necessarily I don't have a strong opinion on it. It's either you love something as much as you do the next thing, or you love a person more than you love your career. You might love your kids more than you love your spouse. So,
well, what is your definition of love?
I told you earlier. I think love is a bond you have for someone that cannot be replaced or taken away.
Okay. So
even though it seems like it can be, when look, you get a couple and they spend years saying, "Oh, I love you so much. Oh, I love you too." What do they even mean by that? do they
that's what I'm
really?
asking. What do you think they mean?
Okay, well, yeah. Okay, so what does that mean when a couple says, "Hey, man, I love you so much. I'm so happy with you. I love you. I love you," and then they get divorced a couple years later? Well, then what was that love?
Yeah.
Well, how strong was that love? Was it love? Was it a kind of love where it's like, "Hey, man, the love I feel for you and that you have for me is extremely convenient right now, and it really helps me out. But when things go wrong, things will change. But I love you right now because
think
things are
that's-
good."
I don't think that's love.
So
at
that's not
all.
love, right? So that's
Yeah.
not love. But isn't that a little bit of love that a person was able to spend the days with spend their time with that person and care for them when they were sick and so on and so forth? But at what level was the love? Isn't that what is one of the most difficult questions? Is what is the greatest level of love, and how do we achieve it towards others or towards God or whatever?
Well, so to answer that question, I think you have to have a solid idea or concept of what love is. So to answer, that the previous question that you were asking, or that you kind of got at, was, is that love at all? Wasn't that some form of love? That they could spend time together and whatever. And I would say, and not definitively, like I don't have anything to really back this up, this thought that I have up with, except for experience and the limited knowledge that I have. But I would say that's infatuation, that's or lust or emotions, right? Because and I come from a place where my working definition of love is a choice. So I believe love is a choice that also includes feelings. So if you love someone, I think that means that you choose to love them, which means to value them, appreciate them, to put them above yourselves when needed, to care for them, and to serve them. And like you said, the greatest form of love is to lay down your life for someone. Okay, so would you do that for just anybody that you said you loved? So I would lay down my life for you. I'd lay down my life for my family. I'd lay down my life for a lot of people that I could name personally, but also too, I could see myself, being one of those people that laid down his life, and one of those knee-jerk reactions where somebody's on the railroad track and you have to jump in front of them, and it's just like fight or flight. But at the end of the day, I think love is a choice, and I think it gets confused with emotions and feelings. And especially if we don't talk about anything else today or in this podcast, except for erotica love, love as it pertains to romance and marriage, then that's fine, because I think there's enough to talk about just in that. When two people say, "Hey, I love you, let's get married till death do us part," and then you have the honeymoon stage and the emotions are there and you're feeling like so excited to be with them and butterflies and all that. But when that disappears, which inevitably it will, and it comes and goes, etc., but when that disappears, then what keeps you? What sustains you? And that is true love. And in the last podcast, I talked about, this mature love in marriage, like when people are married for 15, 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, and they no longer get butterflies every day when they walk in. They don't leave work and like rush home to see their spouse, but they still love them. They have this mature love. And then I don't know if we talked on the record or off the record about arranged marriages, but arranged marriages work. That's like a proven fact. They work. And so how is it that a couple can be set up by, forces outside of themselves to be married and to stay together and make it work. And that right there is living proof that love is a choice. Like, you have to consciously choose to love, and there are different attributes of what love is, like serving and sacrificing for that person, taking care of them, providing for them, helping them, whatever. There's different aspects of love in that regard. But let's say that love is a circle, those things are in it, and the emotions are in it too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So having said that, I think that we don't love as much as we think we love.
Yeah, I agree with you.
And I think that is a huge problem. And, I try to, and this may not help at all. Like, I honestly have no idea what the effects of this are, but for the last probably 6 months, since June, I have consciously tried to not say I love things that are materialistic or fleeting. Like, I've tried to say, oh man, I like that. I'm not perfect at it, right? I've messed up. I can't remember the last time I said I love something. Like, oh man, I love that car, or I love this game, or I love this restaurant. But I'm trying to be more intentional with the word love and what it means to me. And I think if our listeners and us and the world alike could get that concept right of what love is, and then we could agree that it's a choice, then we could work through things better. We could be better problem solvers and whatnot when it comes to romance, at least, or even friendships. Like, when problems arise, like, if the highest form of true love is laying down your life, then why can't you swallow your pride and get over your ego and apologize for something, or to let something go, that irritates you? Like, why are we so quick to forsake our friends and our family and our loved ones? Why are we so quick to forsake them?
Yeah.
If we love them?
Yeah. I bet you that we have the potential to reach love at a level that we still haven't felt. I'm talking about like something that kind of like our consciousness as well. I think that if you look at the grand perspective, if you step back and try to get a bigger perspective, yeah, man, you can say that we're actually still very primitive people, because I think that man, think about it. When somebody doesn't forgive somebody if they've been wronged, or if they hold a grudge for you. I mean, gosh, there's people I know who haven't talked to siblings for 5, 6, 7 years. There's people I know who haven't talked to their parents for 10 to 15 years. And it's like, what are you holding on to? And obviously it's ego. Ego is a huge thing. And think about it. We live in a constant state of survivalism. We're always trying to. It's almost as if we're still living in the caveman times, where everything you didn't trust everything, because everything was out to get you. Like, everything was going to kill you, right? If you weren't careful enough, you're gonna die.
Survival of the fittest. And
we still have that. We still carry that everywhere we go, because, well, first off, I'm not even I'm not talking in terms of violence. When you're walking somewhere and at night and you're afraid someone's gonna stab you for your wallet. But what about trying to protect our emotions? Because if our emotions get messed with, then it weakens us, and then we die. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, man, you're still living, that individual is still living at a very low level consciousness where it's just like survival, survival, survival. Man, I'm telling you, I think, and we can get into some crazy thoughts right now, but I think that humans as a collective have not reached a level of consciousness, potentiality in their consciousness. I don't think we've reached, I don't even think we're close to what we could possibly experience as a human, as a spirit, as energy, as children of God. I don't think we're there, and there's a reason for that. It's because we are focused on the wrong things, and right now we're in a hard time because we're very, very self-indulgent. We're very self-focused, narcissistic, and we have that survival mentality, and we have that man, we have that mentality like, gosh, at any minute what I have can be taken away. If I don't protect it, it's gone. And you got to think, well, what is it exactly that you're protecting? What is it are you so afraid of? And if you are in that kind of state of consciousness, you don't allow yourself to open up to the bigger thing that's out there, the bigger feeling, the higher state of consciousness, compassion, so I think that's globally we're kind of in that time, and I do think that it can for sure, and I think it will change. But I mean, it's no wonder that divorce rates are highest they've ever been, right? It seems like more depression, more divorce, and it's because we're focusing on the wrong things. So yeah, I think that we're very, very, we have the potential to feel love and to give love at a very intense level, but we're a little bit too preoccupied right now with other things, it seems like.
Yeah, I agree completely with that. Everything you said. I mean, I don't think we've even come close to hitting, our peak potential. I'm reminded a lot about, Jesus's sermons, or whatever you would call them, when he was walking the earth, and the things that he said. I mean, like, just the Sermon on the Mount, like, some of the things that he said were so crazy, right? I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, hey, in the Old Testament, you guys used to hear that it was an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, right? If somebody wronged you, you wronged them the same way. But I tell you that if you even say raka to your brother, you've committed murder. Like, if you even say, I hate you and you suck, you're a horrible person, you have committed murder in your heart, right? And you have heard it said that if you sleep with another person or whatever, you've committed adultery. Well, I tell you, if you lust for another person in your mind, you have committed adultery in your heart. And you got to imagine, what was he saying? Like, what was he saying to those people at that time? Like, what must they have thought when he said those so foreign concepts? Like, God, there's no way we could, there's no way that's, first of all, there's no way that's fair, and second of all, that seems like it's unattainable. Like, we can't even say I hate you if somebody wrongs us. Like, that seems a little unfair, right? And then go on, like, man, the book of Luke, where he talks about forgiveness, and if somebody slaps you, on your left cheek, turn your right cheek also. If somebody, I'm paraphrasing, but Jesus says, if somebody asks you for your trench coat, like, almost in a mean way, like a vindictive way, like, hey, give me your trench coat so I can stay dry and screw you. Give them also, like, your rain boots and your gloves and your hat. And if somebody asks you to go with them 100 yards, go with him a mile. You know what I mean? He's like, and again, I can't emphasize this enough. Like, I'm paraphrasing these concepts out of the Bible, but the idea is that when you are asked little by your enemy, and just to give you some context, this is your enemy speaking. This isn't just like some homeless person that's on the side of the road, that asks for your trench coat. This is somebody that you despise, that you don't like, that has wronged you. When they ask these things of you, God says, go the extra mile and bless them. Do no harm to those. Don't repay evil with evil, but bless those who harm you, right? And so...
Hey, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
On that thought, what do you say to a person who, let's just say their outlook is, hey man, look, I get it. Like, it's good to be a good, passionate person. But let me tell you something. I did that for a long time. I was very giving. I was very kind. I was forgiving. I always forgave my enemies, and I gave them, not only did I give them my trench coat, I gave them my everything else. And man, I'm telling you, after doing that for all these years, I just feel like I'm getting walked all over. I end up coming up shorthanded at the end of the day. It seems to me like the people who prosper are the ones who are capable of wrongdoing without feeling any kind of bad or feel it on their conscience. They don't feel it, and you get that a lot in the business world, where it's like, hey man, it's business, it's dog eat dog, and that's just how it is, man. Because it is the animal like survival instinct to just protect yourself and then screw anything else, because guess what? They're gonna take what's yours and not think twice about it. So doesn't that seem to be an issue where it's like people want to know what's the benefit? What's the benefit if I'm constantly being good to people and they're just screwing me over, man, and I can't pay for my food to put on the table?
Well, yeah, I get it.
But you get the point, right?
Yeah, so I got a couple thoughts. The first thought is,
what's the benefit?
Let me answer a couple.
What do you want to answer first?
I want to answer this question that you asked. Okay, this hypothetical about the guy, that says, well, I tried that for a few years, and I see these other people, and it seems like the people that get ahead are the best.
And we could talk about what getting ahead means,
sure,
but
that we don't need to. But anyway, what they perceive as getting ahead, the best is the moralist people, the people that have no conscience. First, let me tell you something. It is impossible to judge how somebody else feels inside just by looking at them on the outside. I mean, think about how true that is in your own life. Think about how well you think you know the closest people that you know, and then think about how well that they think they know you, and then put it in perspective on how unwell they know you, right? Like, we all put on facades. We all put on these shows and make our lives appear to be better than they are to some degree. And so it's impossible to look at somebody and to really gauge how they're doing. I would argue in that scenario that the people that this hypothetical person is idolizing and envying are actually miserable, because I think it's impossible to live a happy life or a joyful life by all that wrongdoing, and unless you just absolutely don't have a conscience, and I don't think that's possible. You know what I mean? I think but
it will eventually come.
It will, yes, it will. It will come to you, and you will live in misery to some degree. And the second thing that I would say to that question that you brought up is that is such a hypothetical question that it would be so hard to speak into, because okay, yeah, I answered half the question by saying, well, that guy that thinks those people are happy may not be really happy. But the other question is, this guy feels like he's getting walked all over and he doesn't have enough to like provide for himself or whatever, because he's being abused or taken advantage of and taken for granted, etc. That's such a hypothetical that that I don't know how to answer that specific case. But I would tell you something that comes up in this hypothetical is the guy's heart. Like, is his heart really in it? You know, why is he doing these things? Because the person that you were speaking of, and I don't think it's a real person, but it sounds like he was, just from the way you were telling it, sounds like this guy is doing it for the wrong reasons, right? Like he's doing it because...
Well, that's the thing. And it's not hypothetical, because, I mean, I've might even felt that too. I mean, I'm over it now, but I do know that there are people out there because of what they have become, and they become bitter and resentful, because that's the thing. They had this ideal on how to carry themselves through this life, and it was good, but because they didn't see because of there were ramifications, there were negatives that came from it, and then they start kind of like in the book of Job, right? The story of Job, where he had everything, and then he cursed God for taking what he had away, but then he had like the turn of heart, but except that in reverse. So it's like somebody has this idea on how to carry themselves to the world, through life. They do it, and then they stop, and then they say, "Gosh, like, why am I constantly struggling?" And this pertains to that person who maybe they are going through some tough times. Like, geez, like, what? I don't understand. Like, why am I like this? And then it's kind of like that Walter White character in Breaking Bad. Remember that Breaking Bad? You don't remember that?
I know the show, but I've never seen it.
Okay, so it was kind of like, he kind of was like a pushover type, right? He was like a pushover, but he was like a really nice guy. Everybody would think he was like a great nice guy, and
he's the teacher.
He's the teacher, right?
Yeah, with the kid that has
cerebral palsy, yeah. And then so you look at this guy and say, man, what a great guy. Like, he's very humble, he's easygoing, he's super nice, and he's got this kid with this condition, and that's hard on him, and it's like, man, just give him some favor, guys, right? And then he gets cancer. It's like, geez, on top of all this, I have cancer now. Like, what's going on? Like, where's this God, or where's the benefit? And if let's just say he was an atheist, didn't believe in God, but still he can say, gosh, I'm a good person. Why are these things happening to me? And then he takes matters into his own hands. He's like, okay, you know what? I got to do something, because life isn't just handing me things that I need. So he eventually takes his path and starts to produce the drugs. And then he becomes powerful, and then he starts making tons of money. And he's like, heck yeah. And he has like this.
How does that? Okay, just to cut you off, because I don't know if the show's over, how it ends. But
he dies in a shootout.
But yeah, like, that's a character in a show, right? That
I did go to a character, but my whole point was there are people who reach a point in their life where they say, you know what, I'm tired of being the nice guy all the time. Like, I need things to go my way I need things to go my way now, so I got to turn into that hardened individual. So that's what I'm talking about.
You don't have to do that, though. I mean, you don't have to turn into a hardened individual to
but what about the answer?
Nice,
what about the answer? Like, say, hey, where are the fruits of my labor, right? As far as being a good person. When somebody does get to that point where it's like they've spent a long time being the pushover good guy type.
Well, so the answer to the question I think that you're getting at is that am I holding this? I believe, and I can't prove this, but I believe in God's law of reaping and sowing. And I believe in it so firmly that I don't think there's any way that a human being can not be affected by the law of reaping and sowing. What you sow, you will also reap. Okay?
If not immediately, then eventually.
Yes. And here's the thing. I know this doesn't give any satisfaction to any viewer that doesn't believe in God. I totally get it. It's one of those blanket answers or whatever, right? But that is why the idea of eternal life is so significant when it comes to this question. Because if you don't believe in eternal life, if you don't believe in life after death, then you may think, okay, get what you can get here on earth, trample over who.
There's nothing else after.
Yeah, and if you got
that is the viewpoint of a lot of people.
Yeah, but here's the bottom line: like, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter what you believe. Truth is truth, right? So even if you don't believe in God, you're gonna find out whether or not He exists when you die. Okay, and if He's real, your belief of Him not being real isn't gonna change the fact that He's real, right? And so, if He is real, and you do live this life, and somehow, and I don't know that this is possible, I don't know if anybody can attest to this, but somehow you sit there on your deathbed and you look back at your life and you crossed a lot of people and you did a lot of shady stuff, but you have this quote, air quote, peace in your life. You've got rest, you've got reward and value, and you feel good about yourself on your deathbed. If that's possible, man, life after that is not going to be good for you in this biblical worldview that I hold. And it doesn't matter, like, whether that's true or not, we'll find out one day. But the thing is, I don't think that that's possible. I don't think a human being can sit on their deathbed after wronging people their whole lives, sowing injustices, sowing malice, sowing hate and greed and envy. I really don't think somebody can get at the end of their life and be okay with that. I think it eats away at people, and I think that's why it's so evident, relevant, and like it's so displayed, I guess, in at least in the U.S., that you can have the most money and the most success and the most girls and the biggest houses and the nicest cars, and at the end of the day, if you don't have love, like, it's not enough. If you don't have value and purpose, it's not enough. And you see these suicides from these quote, air quotes, super successful people. Like, what is that? What is the explanation of that? Like, how can somebody from the outside looking in have everything, like everything, and then, get to a point in their life where they want to take their own life? And I think that's because of the very thing that we're talking about. I think it's because you reap what you sow, and I mean, think about it, Conrad. Like, think about how many people. I get, like, a lot of depressed people. I mean, a lot of poor and impoverished and unsuccessful people commit suicide too. Like, so there's that aspect of it. But think about how many wealthy people. I mean, didn't even Owen Wilson try to commit suicide?
Robin Williams committed suicide.
Yeah. Like, think about, I don't know what Heath Ledger's, death was. I don't know. I don't think he committed suicide, but just like that drug abuse or whatever. Like, here are seemingly what you would think is people being successful, and seems like they've got it all together. They've got everything, man, and then their lives are over, right? And so I just don't think a person can escape God's law of reaping and sowing. And even other religions have karma, and other forms. Yeah, other forms of getting what you deserve. Yeah, and it could be at the end of the day. It could be at the end of your life. And one last thought that I'll tie into this is just today before I came over here, we were talking about how whether you believe in God or not, His rules and laws apply to everyone just the same. And there's a saying, the rain falls on the just and unjust alike. And so if you can have discipline and self-control and you don't believe in God, you can still be very successful and happy person. If you don't believe in God and you treat people right and you are kind and you have a strong work ethic, discipline, yeah, and you don't eat junk and you don't feed your body, your mind and your eyes with trash and garbage, you can be a really great, successful person and die well, right? So you don't need to believe in Jesus to have a great and successful life. I just believe that if that His principles and what He taught in the Bible are for everyone, right? Whether you believe them or not, it's the right thing to do. And so for the person that has gone 3 years and he's like, woe is me, I've done good things for 3 years, he's asking the wrong questions. She's asking the wrong questions. Her mind, his mind, they're at the wrong place. They're not thinking clearly. If that's your question, if that's your state of mind, is like, I've been doing good things for 3 years or 5 years, and like, God, can I get a break? Or life, can I get a break? Like, you're in the wrong state of mind, because you should be doing good things to do good things, not to get something out of it.
Yeah, not to get a reward. I agree with that. I'm reminded of this saying, and this is what ties in with this makes sense of why wealthy people commit suicide and why the impoverished commit suicide, and it all comes down to it could be explained through that scripture where it says, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust decay and where thieves break in and steal. Rather store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and rust do not destroy, do not decay, and thieves cannot come in and steal." Think about it. Why does somebody commit suicide who is impoverished? Because their treasures lie with wanting to be affluent, wealthy, and they're not. So they feel that lack, and they feel it horribly. It gets worse and worse and worse, and they eventually lose all hope, and the feelings of inadequacy and lack just become so powerful that they just are drawn to just end it finally, end the suffering. And for the person who has much, they're obviously focused on something other than what gives life. And so their minds are in the wrong places. Their treasure is on earth. And then think about and it's obvious why somebody who's wealthy loses their wealth and kills himself, because obviously everything that had meaning to them, they lost. And so that makes sense. But that is a very, very powerful scripture. One of my most favorite, because it's extremely impactful for me, and that can be dissected in many ways, and it would take some time. But yeah.
Well, another thing, to piggyback off that, to have your treasure in heaven or on like heaven-like things, and then you tie that into suicide, I would say there are many reasons people commit suicide, right? Greed,
Of course, yeah.
Greed, envy, depression, whatever. But I think there are a couple core elements or aspects of it that tie directly into heaven-minded things, and that is value and purpose and love, right? So if you getting your value, purpose, and love from the world,
Yeah.
then you're going to be you could be suicidal. If you're getting your value, purpose, and love from God, then
the eternal.
from heaven, from heavenly minded things, etc., then you're going to be sustained.
Right.
Easier said than done. But I think those three things correlate with heavenly minded.
Yeah.
Things that are eternal.
That's the thing. You have to first off, you have to understand it, believe it. You have to understand it, and you have to believe it. If you don't believe in that, like say you're a nihilist, then man, how in the world do you find something that is eternal, that sustains forever? If you are somebody who thinks that, um, everything that we see here, Earth, it's all just by evolutionary chance, where it's all just a bunch of molecules that collided together, and stuff just happened, and there's no reason for it. It just is, and whatever happens is going to happen. Things are going to change, and the universe is going to shift, and there's going to be other things. There's going to be explosions and implosions. There's going to be times of where there's going to be nothing, and then things are going to be reborn again, and there might be times where, who knows, there might be an end where it ends everything forever. And it's like, man, what a horrible way to base your life off of. And so it's very easy to find meaning, or it's much easier to find meaning when you can conceptualize the eternal. Not only conceptualize it, but believe it. Because if you don't believe it, then it doesn't matter.
One of my favorite verses is, without faith it is impossible to please God. Without faith, without believing, like you can't even start the race, right? You can't even start without that faith, without that believing that there is an eternal life for you. And that's, we could get into that. That's a whole very in-depth conversation on how you live your life if you don't have a belief in an eternal or absolute authority.
Well, that's something that I would like to learn a lot on, because my views on the afterlife, like the life in heaven, and what that all is about, and how does that even look? Do I perceive it with my mind? Am I right in, is my concept of heaven right by using just my brain and its potential that it has now, like envisioning heaven as just a place where people are hanging out and sitting down and talking? Or is it this would be good to talk for a good couple hours on, but because those are my I have some questions about that, because I don't fully understand that at all.
Well, even God said, here we see just in a little glimpse, like we just like you said, our consciousness and our full potential of awareness is, we're using so little. Yeah. I mean, now multiply that by infinity when you talk about the afterlife. What is not made known to us now will be made known to us, and then it'll all click, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, does it do any good to try to conceptualize what life after death will look like? I mean, to some degree, sure, it's a great.
But there's got to be something. There's got to be enough there for a person with the brain capacity they have to believe it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I think there's enough scriptures. There are several camps on what life after death will be. But even within those, they all there's only so many. Like they take different parts of the Bible and talk about like what life after that's going to be like. But even then, I mean, to get to wrap up and talk about it, like love is a choice. Love is it should be, and it is unconditional. And you see that most in God and His sacrifice through Jesus Christ, but also in the institution or in the family, like the mother and the child or the father and the child, like that type of love is unconditional. You hear like stories where parents find out that their children were part of a mass murder shooting, and it's like, man, even that, like, doesn't take away a mother's love, right? Like,
Yeah.
or a father's love for that. I mean, you said it too, like this bond, like there's nothing that you can do to not be my child, right? And the same thing, like I could be really unhappy with you and unpleased and resent your choices or whatever, but like the love that I have for you is unconditional, like, no, I don't agree with your choices, and I'm disgraced by them, etc. But like that, like I can never not be your biological father, right? Because that's a bond that can't be broken. I think that is the epitome of love. That is what love should represent. And then I think it's great, to meditate and think about what you said with store up for yourself treasures in heaven, and think about things that are eternal. And
I would like to on either if not on the next session, then the one after. But I would like to take the time and really dissect that particular scripture and interpret things in a way so that they're more understandable. So that, because I think a lot of things are, we can intellectualize them and make sense of them in that regard, but there's also the feeling. What does it feel like? And I want to get into that on our next session.
Cool.
So yeah, any last thoughts for today?
No, I feel good about it.
Okay. Well, thanks for listening, and enjoy the evening. We'll catch you next time.